Hi painters. First assignment here, I'm gonna do a quick little demo for you, just to give you an idea. It's called Grid. And the idea at this point is to start acclimating yourself to your materials a little bit, to the brushes and the paint and the solvent. And when I use the word solvent, what I'm talking about is the water you're using with your acrylic paint to dilute the paint. So this assignment's called Grid, and it's basically just making some grids with paint, and then also using transparent washes on the grid. So you're going to need your a single color. So in this, I'm going to start with a blue. Your number 12 brush, which is the big one, okay? And the brushes, these feel pretty soft. Sometimes, like this one here, sometimes brushes have some starch in them, so you can kind of sort of work the starch out like that, or even dip it in your water. Get them wet and let them soak for a little bit, and then the starch comes out and they become a little softer. So I'm going to start, we're going to be using the number 12 brush. I want you to use the number 12 brush because it's not you're not going to like try to control it the same way as you would a skinnier brush. I think skinny brushes, tiny brushes, they're important to use, but they also bring up associations of using pencils, okay, to draw. And we're learning to paint. So we're going to start with the big number 12 brush. Get your palette, in case I have my gray palette here, a single color. Just put a little blob down on the paint, on the, first thing you have to do, sorry. I would like you to divide the paper in half, like this. There's a ruler. You don't need to use a ruler. You can just draw it freehand if you want, but I had this ruler sitting around. And just draw a single line across, let's see, is that about the same? You can measure if you want, or I'm just eyeballing it. I don't care that much. Across your palette, your canvas, not your palette, your canvas pad, okay? Single line. We're gonna do a grid here and a grid here. So I'm gonna start with the first grid, then I'll stop the video because it'll get too long. So just a little blob of paint. Don't waste your paint. See, I didn't put that much in there, all right? And the idea is to start to learn how much solvent you need, how much of your water you need to get the paint to the right consistency to start having it flow, okay? So I just brought a little bit of water to the blob of paint. And I've never used this paint before, so I'm learning too. Paint is all different, okay? Paint is just different. So what I'd like to do is simply paint a grid. I'm shaking, I had too much coffee. Okay, just paint a grid. And I'm gonna do this here kind of quickly. And you're learning how the relationship the brush has to the canvas pad, to the pigment. You're learning a feel for the brush and the marking, okay? These are all important concepts. Just let the brush kind of dictate the size of the mark. Like I'm not pressing super hard, I'm kind of letting it glide. One thing to note is the angle of the brush. I'm not like pushing it straight down, it's kind of like going like that. Okay, there's my first series. I'll do another grid. Or another pattern of marks across to create the grid, sorry. Now notice in that, after I made that first one, I rotated my brush to get the second one because there was paint on the other side. One of the interesting things about brushes to understand is that when you press them down, the paint squishes up to see how that's squishing up to the top side? So that you can flip it around. So I flipped it and then had kind of fresh paint there. And you can fiddle around with it like by doing this. Hey, that's kind of cool looking. I like how they create the little shadows. I'm gonna leave it because see how that one looks like it's behind those and these look like they're in front. That's kind of neat looking. Anyway, that's your first grid. Rinse your brush out, clean it, and you're gonna do another one here, and I'll do that in a second on this part of the paper. Hi there again. I'm doing the second grid. This one's starting to dry a little bit. I rinsed out my brush good. Okay, I've got a big bucket of water. You can see a big bucket of water is sometimes a little bit easier because there's more water, so it dissolves things, or thins the paint down. Anyway, so I'm gonna put a blob of orange. I'm just gonna go for the easy one here. Orange and blue. they're complements. It'll look cool just kind of one next to each other. You know, for this one, I would like you to... Nope, just keep using the bigger brush. I was going to have you use a different size brush, but I might with the next ones. Anyway, so we're going to just do another grid here. See how I rotate the brush? Oh, there's still paint on that side. Don't worry too much. You can see the paints. Now this orange, I'm learning right away, is fairly transparent. It has a kind of a thinness to it. But that's typical with acrylic paint. More water. You'll learn to judge the amount of water that you want to use depending on what you're trying to do, okay? And this is all part of that. So you want to use the water to get the paint to flow nicely. I need a little more orange on there. I didn't squirt out enough. I'm just going to squirt out a bit more. You know, as the semester progresses, you will go through paint. So the kit you bought or the tubes you bought, you probably need to add to those as we go along. Just kind of depends on how much. Some people paint really thin, other people paint really thick. Just kind of depends. I squirted out too much paint there. So that's what I'd like you to do for the first step of this assignment. And I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll show you the second step. And then you can let yours dry as well. Okay, now those, isn't that cool how those look? Like those are sort of standing out. Can you see them okay? There's a little glare on the, let me just try to adjust that. I have to work on these lights a bit more. There's a little glare right here, but I'll shift this over. Maybe that'll help, yeah. You can see that these two marks are kind of, there's an illusion created there between these two marks and then these two, and then the way those seem to go in front and then behind. It's kind of cool looking, isn't it? That's creating space. Very simple. Anyway, I'm going to let these dry and post these videos.